My name is Alwyn Jones. I teach law at De Montfort University in Leicester, where one of the courses that I teach is an optional module on refugee law, and that's particularly attractive to students who've chosen to do one of our specialist law degree programs that focuses on law, human rights and social justice. I've also been involved in supporting a group that we have called STAR, which is the local branch of a national network of student groups, and that's Student Action for Refugees. And they've got involved with a local charity, Refugee Action, who have got a new initiative called Fresh Start, that will provide focused help for people who are experiencing problems in the asylum system.
And maybe you could also tell us a little bit more about the module that you teach.
Yes, certainly. The module on immigration and refugee law looks at a number of important issues, from how the UK operates our border control system, to the experience that people have when they arrive, what happens if they apply for any kind of state support, can they be put in a detention centre, will they qualify for refugee status or for a similar form of protection. And we go on then to look at special cases where people might be applying for refugee status in particular situations, such as if they're facing harm, danger linked to their gender or their sexuality or something like that, as well as also discussing situations where people might come to the UK for other reasons, so for example, to work, which obviously are in a very different situation than people coming to seek sanctuary from persecution.
And are there aspects of the module that students find surprising, unexpected?
Yes, there are some surprises. For example, quite early on in the course, we discuss what qualifies a person to be recognised as a refugee in the law. And if we asked ordinary people in the street or in the pub what they thought a refugee was, people might say it's somebody who's escaped danger, who's left because there's some kind of threat to them. And well, that's part of it. But as the students discover, not everybody who flees danger will be recognised as being a refugee in a legal sense. There can be issues of proof. There are questions about whether the type of harm that somebody would face will be recognised as a form of persecution. And also, fleeing danger by itself and crossing a border to another country doesn't make somebody a refugee unless that danger would be individually targeted at the person, for example, because of their political or religious beliefs. So not everyone who flees genuine danger will be recognised as a refugee, and that's often a surprise. And also, people often expect that people who come to the UK and enter the asylum system will receive generous state support, and obviously many people might believe that. But when students realise that people in the asylum system can face a situation where they're not legally allowed to work, and in some situations aren't allowed to receive any support from the state in terms of housing or benefits, or only the barest minimum below the level of support that a British citizen would receive, again, that can be a surprise for a student realising that what they're discovering is not what they expected to see.
And is there a difference between a refugee and an asylum seeker?
Yes. So somebody who's applied for asylum is simply somebody who's, well, as the word suggests, made an application to be recognised as a refugee, and who therefore may be recognised in future or not. How do we know if somebody is really a refugee? Well, there's a United Nations definition that's used in the UK and many other countries, which has a number of different elements. And I'll simplify it, of course, for our conversation. They would have to show not only that they're afraid or that they believe that they'll be harmed if they're returned, but there's some kind of tangible evidence to support their claim. A person would need to show that they would face a risk of serious harm, and that the country they've come from would not protect them from that serious harm. And only certain kinds or levels of harm will be recognised. And as I suggested earlier, they would have to show that the harm they would face would not simply be, as it were, a generalised risk. So, for example, if I'm fleeing a country which is in civil war, my home might have been destroyed, a member of my family might have been killed, because maybe I live near a front line in that conflict. But if the risks that I face are not individually targeted to me, then I wouldn't necessarily be recognised as a refugee.
And then one of the things that has also been happening is that over the past 5 years or so, the number of people who have been claiming asylum in the UK has been decreasing. Why is this? Why do you think this is so?
Yes, people might ask, why is it that the numbers of people applying for refugee status in the UK are falling? And anybody who wants to know can, of course, find the information on the Home Office website so they can see for themselves what the figures are. So why are the numbers dropping? Of course, the reasons why a person might travel to another country to seek sanctuary from persecution will vary according to each individual person. And so there's no single reason. It can be that to some extent the total number of people seeking refuge around the world will change from year to year, and the general trend in the UK reflects that. But there are some specific reasons why people might no longer be able to reach the UK. In particular, traditionally, if we think about border controls, what we're imagining is somebody in a uniform, maybe standing at passport control as an airport or a ferry port, who's checking people's passports as they enter the UK. Somebody who's checking that people have a right to enter. But what we're seeing increasingly in recent years is that the UK's border controls are something that you will meet before you leave another country, before you catch your flight to the UK, before you catch the train or the ferry. You'll already have had your status checked. And of course that system has certain benefits for the UK. The idea is that we can prevent somebody who doesn't have a right to enter the UK from engaging in a journey. But that system can also impose risks for people who are trying to escape persecution. Why might those risks be experienced by people who are refugees? Because if a policy in its effect simply reduces the number of people who can reach the UK from other countries, and if that policy doesn't distinguish as well as it might do between people who are fleeing persecution and people who aren't, then people might not be able to reach sanctuary from persecution. Just to give you a couple of examples. If you imagine a situation when you're in one of the country's most dangerous areas in the world, and you are in danger from the authorities in your country, maybe you have only a short time to get together just a few things to take with you on a journey to a safe place. One of the questions I often ask the students is, what would you take? And in particular, would you take your passport? And people naturally might say, well, of course, if I'm going on a journey to another country, I'd always take my passport. I'll need to show that to be able to travel. But then we encourage people to think a bit more deeply about that. If you are in danger from the authorities, from people in uniform in the country that you're trying to leave, are you going to want to show those people in uniform your passport, which identifies you, if that will confirm to them that you're somebody they want to detain, somebody they want to persecute? So carrying your own passport might be something that we'd normally think, of course I'd take that with me. But of course, if you're a refugee, that could be something that exposes you to danger. So somebody then might, for genuine reasons, need to use false papers or to try and travel without using papers to reach a safe place. Now, of course, for understandable reasons, the UK has laws and policies designed to prevent people travelling in that way. And so, for example, if I try to board a flight to the UK, or a ferry or a train, then there'll be somebody working for the airline or the ferry company or the train company will be looking at my papers to see, are they genuine or not? Do I have evidence of who I am that they can rely on? But of course, if I'm an employee for an airline or a ferry or train company, I'm not an expert on who is a refugee. I'm not really equipped to work out who's really in danger. My job is simply to work out who's got authentic papers and who doesn't, who's carrying a real passport and who's carrying a fake. And so if our policies achieve a reduction in people entering the UK without the proper papers, then of course, yes, we will reduce the numbers of people coming to the UK who don't have a genuine reason to be here. Yes, that will be the case. But we may also prevent people from escaping a situation where they'd face real danger. So although the numbers of people applying for refugee status may go down, that doesn't necessarily mean that the numbers of people seeking sanctuary from persecution are also falling.
Is the UK under an obligation to take in people seeking sanctuary?
The UK, like a number of countries, like most countries in the world, is a party to a major United Nations treaty, which means that we've promised not to return refugees to a place that would be dangerous for them. And of course, one possible impact of the policies that the UK has adopted is that while we're reducing the total number of people reaching the UK from other countries, we may also be reducing the number of people escaping from danger. And so there could be genuine harm experienced by people.
And then one of the arguments that are advanced by people who oppose the presence of asylum seekers in the UK is that for most asylum seekers, the UK is not the first safe country that asylum seekers pass through. And because of that, the UK shouldn't accept them in.
Yes, people often ask, why don't people find a safe refuge that's nearer their home? And if you look at the evidence, for example, on the website of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, UNHCR, what you find, in fact, is that the vast majority of people who leave a place of danger to seek refuge do, in fact, travel a relatively short distance. So if you look at the countries that receive the largest number of refugees in the world, they're generally not countries like the United Kingdom. In fact, what we find is that they're people who've travelled from a dangerous country simply to a country just across a border, and they're often living in a refugee camp in very basic conditions. So in most cases, in fact, that's what happens. Only a tiny minority of the world's refugees reach the UK. And the UK does have a policy which says that if a person applies for refugee status here, if they've spent any significant time in a safe country on the way, the UK will expect that person to have applied for refugee status in that safe country. Why then might people come to the UK, we might ask? Why is it they come here? Why not to somewhere that's on the way, somewhere nearer home? Well, of course, there could be all kinds of reasons why people might go to a safe country or try to reach a certain country to reach safety. If I was having to leave the country where I live, I might think about how would I make a fresh start in the country that I'm travelling to? What would I need? Maybe I'd need to be in a country where I speak the language. So, for example, if I live in a country that was a former British colony, then I may have the advantage if I come to the UK that I do speak English. So if I'm a teacher, for example, or a nurse, if I'm able to work, which of course people who apply for refugee status generally aren't, but if I am able to work, then I'll be in a better position once my claim for refuge from persecution has been recognised to start a new life. At least for a period of time until the situation in my country improves and I can then return to where I started.
And why aren't asylum seekers allowed to work?
Why aren't asylum seekers allowed to work? The answer that would normally be given is that allowing asylum seekers to work would be seen as what's called a pull factor, something that would attract people to come to the UK, to choose to come to the UK. the research that's been done about people who've come to seek refuge from persecution has some quite surprising findings. For example, Home Office research found that in many cases, people who seek refuge didn't actually choose which country they were going to at all. They may have paid quite a lot of money to an agent, a people smuggler, and said, here's the money, get me to somewhere safe. And in those types of cases, a person might arrive in the UK or Germany or France or another country, and only after they've arrived discover where they are. So of course, that isn't somebody who's made a choice based on their opportunity to work or to receive support in the UK as opposed to any other country. And the same research also found that people who applied for refuge from persecution in the UK knew very little, either about the amount of support or opportunities to work in the UK, or about comparisons between support and opportunities to work in the UK compared to other countries in Europe or other countries which are democracies where human rights are protected. So if people don't know about what their opportunities are to work or to receive support elsewhere, and in some cases people don't even choose which country they'll seek refuge in, then it's difficult then to sustain the argument that people are coming into the UK claiming to seek refuge from persecution, but actually to seek work. Of course, there'll always be some people who aren't telling the truth. But if you look at the countries where people are coming from, and of course the information is available on the Home Office website or the website of the United Nations High Commission on Refugees, you can see for yourself where people are coming from in the main. It's the countries that we've heard about and read about and seen on the news, where there is real danger affecting people, often because of their culture, their religion, their language, or their political views.
Should asylum seekers be allowed work?
Yes, they should, at least after a limited period of time. What we've found is that there are what are called legacy cases, and of course there's plenty of information about that online. Legacy cases mean that in some situations people can be left in the asylum system for years, not knowing what their future will be, not knowing if they'll have to return to a country where they face real danger. And many people in this situation are legally banned from working. Some of them are legally banned from receiving any state support or access to state housing as well, or they receive just the bare minimum to meet at least some of their basic needs. In that situation, what we've found is that many people who could make a genuine contribution to life in the UK don't have the opportunity to. Of course, sometimes people criticise refugees and say, how can they take from us, so for example, a place to live, if they're not making a contribution? But of course the problem is, if we ban them from working, we're not allowing them to make a contribution through working and through paying taxes, just like any other worker would do. And if you think about the benefits that we could receive from refugees and other migrants, from the skills and the experience that they bring, those are very real benefits. And if you look at British history, for example, whether it's recent experiences or even back to the Industrial Revolution, if you find out about all of the contributions that people who are originally refugees have made to British society, to science and culture and literature, the benefits are very real.
And in your opinion, is there anything that needs to be done to improve the way this country deals with asylum seekers?
There are serious questions about several areas of what we do now. There are questions to be asked about how the UK deters people from coming to the UK to seek refuge. Questions about how well our laws and policies distinguish between people who genuinely would be in danger if they were sent back and people who aren't. There are questions about how we treat people when they arrive. I think most people will have heard about the detention and removal centres that we use in the UK. And people might imagine that when people are living behind barbed wire and behind locked doors, that they must have committed a crime. They must be at least suspected of some kind of offence against our law. In practice, what we find is that people, including children, are still detained behind locked doors and behind barbed wire, even if they're not suspected of committing any crime, even if from the moment when they arrive in the UK, they do everything that British authorities ask them to do, they can still be put in a detention centre. Their freedom can still be taken away. So the process of arrival, how we treat people when they arrive, the legacy cases of people who can be stuck for years in limbo, not knowing what their future will be, unable to work and unable to access state support. And of course, the UK authorities are doing some work to try and improve the situation, to make decisions more quickly, and to try and reduce the legacy cases, to reduce the numbers of people still waiting for years, not knowing what their future will be. But those problems still remain, and so there's plenty more work to be done.
And then we also notice that the UK actively tries to return asylum seekers to countries like Iraq, Afghanistan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Zimbabwe and Somalia. What problems does this present? Should the UK be doing this?
Well, what I encourage anybody thinking about that to ask themselves is, what's been the news from the countries that you've mentioned? What might be the real risks that people may face if they're returned? It may come as a surprise to many people that our policy is to return people to some countries where people would face very real dangers. As I've discussed, there can be a number of reasons why people might not be recognised as a refugee because of a lack of evidence. Many people in the UK, even if they had evidence in their country of origin to bring, may not have been able to bring that evidence with them because it would be a real source of danger if they were caught carrying that evidence travelling to the UK. So all they can do is talk about what they've experienced and the dangers that they face. And if they're not believed, then they may face a real risk of being returned to a country where their rights would not be protected. And so, yes, there are real dangers in these situations. And of course, it's essential that the authorities look at everybody's case in terms of the actual danger that that person would face if they're returned, and not simply say that everybody who doesn't qualify for the legal definition of refugee be returned to a particular country.
And then you've also written a number of articles on ill health, inadequate medical care and removals. Could you tell us a little bit more about those articles?
Yes, what our research investigated was what happens if somebody faces a life-threatening illness, and if, in addition to that, they wouldn't receive any effective treatment for their condition in their country of origin. Let me give you one example of that. There was a young woman from Uganda who came to the UK because she'd been detained and abused by members of armed groups in her country. So she was saying that she's a refugee. But what happened was that the UK authorities didn't accept her claim for sanctuary. After she arrived in the UK, she found that she was ill. And of course, healthcare professionals investigated her situation, and they found that she was in fact HIV positive. And her problem was that although in the UK and in other wealthy countries it's possible now to access antiretroviral drug treatment and to maintain a relatively normal life, not a perfect life, but a relatively normal life, her argument was that if she was returned to Uganda, she would not be able to access the life-saving treatment that she would need. Now, in some countries, this treatment is offered for free, including some countries in Africa, but there are still parts of the world where for somebody to return and not be able to access this treatment would be to face a virtual certain death without dignity, without this life-saving treatment. What our research looked into was, could there be any legal arguments that people could use to prevent them being returned in this situation? And the case that I mentioned went to our highest court of appeal, to the House of Lords in London, in 2005, and also to the European Court of Human Rights 3 years later in 2008. And what both courts decided was that this woman could be returned to Uganda, because it would only be in the rarest and most exceptional cases that somebody would be able to argue that a life-threatening illness and lack of treatment for that would justify a right to remain in the UK. And well, of course, we can recognise that the UK doesn't have the resources to treat everyone in the world who would need treatment. What we're talking about is not everybody in the world coming to the UK, but a relatively small proportion of people who, in this case, are able to reach the UK. And don't forget, this young woman didn't know about her healthcare condition until after she arrived in the UK. That may come as a surprise, because you might think, surely here, anyone who may be HIV positive could simply get a test and know their condition. But there may be a number of obstacles in other countries, either lack of accessibility to reach the test, or sometimes the stigma and the discrimination associated with a finding that someone is HIV positive can be real barriers for somebody determining their status. So on one hand, well, certainly the UK, nobody would expect the UK to treat everybody in the world who's HIV positive, of course not. But there's a question mark over whether, in some exceptional cases, the UK should decide not to return somebody to a country where they'd face a death without dignity from a life-threatening illness that we know we could prevent.
And my final set of questions is around the DMU STAR.
The STAR is Student Action for Refugees. The branch at De Montfort University is just a local branch of a national organisation that's been going for some time. And many students studying law at university choose the subject because they want to be able to make a positive difference in the lives of other people. They often say, I want to be able to help people. And if I ask them, well, what will you do? How will you help other people? They often talk about what they hope to do as a lawyer in future. But what Student Action for Refugees offers is an opportunity for people, while they're still a student, to make a practical difference in the lives of other people. For example, what STAR in Leicester at De Montfort University have done is that we have volunteered, for example, with a local drop-in centre for young people who've come from countries such as Afghanistan to Leicester. And often, if they're young people in a city they don't know, coming from a very different culture and country, they may feel very isolated. And so there's a local project which provides an opportunity for those young people to simply get together in effectively what's a sort of youth club. They can just have a cup of tea and take part in things like table tennis and talk to people, and our students volunteer, just to provide some social support and perhaps a better understanding of life in the UK. A more recent initiative is called Fresh Start. That's run by a group of local projects in Leicester, and the lead group is a local charity, Refugee Action. And what Refugee Action are doing is providing temporary accommodation and intensive support for people who are stuck at some point in the refugee process. If you ask somebody, what was the most difficult time in your life, the most stressful, people might initially think of maybe one big problem that they experienced. But if they really think back, people often would say, it was when I faced several really difficult problems at the same time. That was the most difficult time for me. And when people are stuck in the asylum system, they may face several really big problems at the same time. They may need to access good legal advice to resolve legal questions, maybe to make an appeal, because perhaps there was a problem with the case with the case the first time that it was heard. But at the same time, They may face very real problems, for example, about finding a place to stay and access to support to provide for their basic needs like food, perhaps if they've got young children with them, needs for them and so on. And so if their energy and their time is divided between finding a shelter for tonight, meeting their basic needs and so on, then it can be difficult to also get access to maybe legal help or medical help that they might need. And so the idea of the Fresh Start project is that our students will volunteer working to help people to get intensive support, to have that stability that they need so that they can access perhaps that legal or that medical help to help them make a fresh start in their lives, to receive the support and the protection that they need.
So from the point of view of the student, why is it important to get involved, to take part in a project like STAR?
Why is it important for a student? For all kinds of reasons, and of course different students will have different reasons. For most students, it's about making a difference to the lives of people who are experiencing very difficult, sometimes traumatic circumstances. We're aware of how difficult it can be just to live an ordinary life during a harsh winter like the winter that we're experiencing at the moment. Imagine if you were facing the uncertainty of not knowing if you're going to be sent back to one of the world's most dangerous countries, and at the same time not knowing where your next meal will come from or whether you'll be able to sleep somewhere tonight with a roof over your head. So that's a very important motivation for our students, being able to make a difference in people's lives. Also, of course, students find that they can learn more about the real experiences of other people. And it can be important for students who want to get a better understanding of the world around them, the real situations that people face if they're refugees, which of course can inform their studies at university. For many students who are studying on our refugee law option or our specialist law degree on law, human rights and social justice, if they can see the actual effects that our law and policies have, that can help them to make a more informed, a more analytical contribution to a conversation in a seminar, or to maybe some work that they're writing as part of their degree. So not only can they make a tangible difference in the lives of people who face very difficult situations, they can be better informed when they're discussing these issues in the classroom or writing an essay as well.
Dr. Jones, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.